So the power of Buddhist practice I love about is the power of embracing things I don't like about myself. Today, I want to share with you my story of practicing the Buddhist Four Noble Truths and how I raised the awareness about discrimination against my self-identity and ultimately embraced that part of myself that I didn't like. As a native Japanese, I moved to the US when I was 23 years old. When I was in Japan, I was an English language major at a local university and had thought I was fluent in the language because it seemed like I was much more fluent than other Japanese people around me. However, as soon as my arrival in the United States, it turned out that I was not able to understand almost any scenes of conversations done in English. So here's what was going on. When I was in Japan, I believed I was fluent. But after I came to the US, the reality proved that I was not fluent. What kind of gap was that? So this was the gap between my identity, me as being fluent on one hand, and me as not fluent on the other hand. So that's the gap between my belief in my fluency and my reality of not fluent. It was this gap of my identity that caused a great amount of everyday stress and suffering. So for instance, when a cashier person at a local grocery store said to me, "Hi, did you find everything okay?" I was caught by surprise because it was too far from my culture of Japan where no cashiers talk to you like that. But what was more problematic was that I could not catch what that cashier said to me. I didn't hear it as, "Hi, did you find everything okay?" Rather, it sounded to me, "Heidi, you are fired. ABG just okay?" I was in panic, and yet was not courageous enough to express my confusion right away, nor mentally agile enough to form a sentence such as, "Could you say that again?" in my head. I was confused because I was neither Heidi nor Kate, and I was not a Christian, and yet I was a Buddhist, and I am a Buddhist. I was miserable. Filled with innumerable situations like this, the first few years of my life in the United States were tough and challenging because of the linguistic limitations. However, I started to wonder if it was really the linguistic challenge that was causing these difficult situations. Then I started to place my situations in the formula of the Buddhist teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Then, out of my surprise, I discovered that the cause of my stress and suffering was not really my linguistic limitation itself, but rather it was my discrimination against such linguistic limitations. In other words, I did not want to accept the fact that my command of the oral English skills was not good enough to get by in the US. I was not strong enough to face my reality. Out of my weakness and lack of courage to face my reality, I was instead making my greatest effort for excluding my identity as not being fluent in the English language. But it was because of my inability to accept the reality of out of my weakness that caused my experience of suffering. Unlike my belief, in reality, being not fluent was precisely the real aspect about myself back then, but I wanted to discriminate that particular part of myself so that I can pursue my illusion of preserving myself as a fluent English speaker. That way, I was trying to control my own identity and to match that up with the reality. This is how my self-discrimination led to an experience of suffering. A couple years later, I finally admitted my linguistic limitations and hence my identity as a non-fluent English speaker. It was finally from that time on when I was much less stressed out and started to enjoy my learning of English in the US. When I could not understand the words of cashier, I asked what was stated and sometimes asked some questions about their usages of English vocabs. Then paradoxically, a real path towards becoming a fluent English speaker was finally opened up for me. That was very interesting. As soon as I started to let it go, it immediately started to come back to me. So this is the power of the Buddhist teachings for me. That was a moment when I realized the nonsense of self-discrimination against a particular aspect of my identity. With that awareness attained as a result of practicing the Four Noble Truths vis-a-vis my particular identity crisis, I finally started to embrace my difficult reality as it was. Now, retrospectively speaking, surely my first few years in the US were hard. Those miserable days would not change. But here's something I learned from this experience. I cannot change what happened to me in the past. However, I can change the meaning of what happened in the past. Today, the meaning of that suffering is no longer only suffering. Thanks to that experience of suffering, I can better understand feelings of others who may be undergoing similar situations created by their willingness to hold onto particular aspects of their own identity, and as a result being unable to accept a certain reality about themselves. What I can do for these fellow folks is not to advise them to let go of what they are holding on to because they are the ones who know that they must let go of their attachments. That's why they are suffering like I used to. Rather, what I could offer is to create a sense of community, sense of bond, and to listen to their stories and feelings, and to be with them until a breakthrough moment comes to them. I can invite them to learn and practice Buddhist ideas with me because ultimately, the only person who can solve their problem is no one other than themselves. So please, by all means, share your thoughts, questions, and your stories of discriminations. When it comes to the term discrimination, that tends to be considered in terms of discrimination against some other people, not yourself. But here was my take. Self-discrimination about your own self. Okay, thank you for watching. See you soon.